everyone, I'm Meredith, and listen, I'm just a girl stuck in my apartment looking for someone, well, anyone other than my fiance who I love dearly to talk to me. It's been a while. So I found some people. This week it's all weddings that have been postponed because of the pandemic. It's something I know all too well about. My guest today is Bryan Festa. He's an executive event host at Elegant Music Group. His work and company has been greatly affected because of COVID and weddings across the board being either canceled or postponed to a much later date. He's also a groom that had to postpone his own wedding, which was slated for this summer. Bryan, thank you so much for joining me. Let's talk about it.
Hey, Meredith, how are you? So glad to be here.
Thanks so much. Glad to have you. So we're talking wedding postponements. You're on both sides of this. That's quite an achievement. You work in wedding entertainment. You're also a groom, and you guys had to postpone their wedding. Weddings are being postponed everywhere. How have you coped with this time?
So it is an interesting dynamic that I have being, on both sides of it. I think it's helped me in certain ways because I've seen kind of what everybody else is dealing with firsthand, even though I didn't experience it up front with them. So now going through it myself, I think it made it a little bit easier knowing the state of our industry.
So when were you supposed to be married?
So our original wedding was planned for August 16th of 2020, which is up and coming very quickly. And we ended up postponing to September 12th of 2021.
I think there'll be some time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, fingers crossed for everybody out there. Hopefully we can put all this stuff behind us and get back to some sort of normalcy.
On just the groom side of things for you, have you and your fiance thought about any other way to mark the date for the original August plan coming up, or something you're trying to do to celebrate still?
Sure. So, I mean, neither day really had much significance to us. The original date and the postponed date due pretty heavily to my calendar availability being in the industry. So it's not like it was a difficult decision for us, but what we're doing on August 16th, I mean, we're tossing around the idea of still maybe even possibly small ceremony wedding. But regardless, we're going to have our bridal parties over to my parents' backyard and just get everybody together, introductions and all that kind of stuff. And I think we're going to put together maybe like a bridal party Olympics kind of going on, groomsmen against bridesmaids. So.
Talk to me about your company and what you've been going through and how you've been readjusting to weddings now in the time of the coronavirus and going forward from that.
For sure. So, I mean, we have a pretty good foothold in our industry. We've been in the business for about 31 years. Company name is Elegant Music Group. We're based out of northern New Jersey. So tri-state area is kind of our geographical location, but we travel pretty much everywhere. So overview without plugging our company. We do bands, DJs, live musicians, as well as, all your photo booths, lighting, and event design, stuff like that. We do about 700 events a year. So with the coronavirus kind of, when it started, it was a mad rush for everybody. And it was just interesting to deal with because there was no proper protocol for anybody. This was a new virus. It was something that happened extremely rapid. It was a very rapid progression. I mean, one day we were DJing weddings, and then the next day we're getting phone calls of everybody postponing their weddings. So we got out ahead of it. I give ourselves a pat on the back, as well as our industry as a whole. I think we got out ahead of it as much as we can, and now moving forward, obviously there's procedures in place that we've kind of developed on the fly. There was no right answer for everything that happened, for sure.
Was there a part of you as things were beginning to ramp up early mid-March that thought, no, show must go on. People are getting married and I'm going to be there?
Yeah. So, I mean, we still kind of have that mindset we obviously are practicing safety precautions and whatnot, but we're governed by the state laws and guidelines. So if there are weddings, we're still going to be there. We've kind of preached that from the start, that, you know, there is an added insurance policy with our company, knowing that it's not just like, oh, well, this is happening, you're out of luck. We treat all of our couples like, you know, we build a personal relationship with them. So it's never, I mean, as much as there is the business side of it, I mean, if you're having a wedding, we're still going to be there, and we'll figure out ways to make, you know, our staff and your friends and family feel comfortable. So we still have that mindset of just trying to be there for, you know, the most important days of most of our couples' lives.
Mm-hmm. During the shutdown, I mean, tri-state area timing all basically aligned. Did you do any weddings at that time? Were you a part of any Zoom weddings or any other kind of special occasions?
Sure. So, I mean, my last wedding that I performed at was like full scale, was at the start of it. So it was kind of, no, coronavirus was definitely a thing at that time. So it seemed as if people weren't necessarily taking it seriously. I, of course, my germophobic self, showed up with Lysol wipes that I was able to find
Yeah.
places. So that's kind of how early on it was that I actually had proper equipment and was able to find it places. So it was interesting to have like conversations with people being like, hey, did you hear about this coronavirus thing? And everybody being like, oh yeah, I heard of it, to the next day it being, you know, this global pandemic. So that was my last like full scale wedding. That was in, I'd have to pull it up, I think it was March, mid to late March sometime. But I actually had my first backyard Zoom wedding this past weekend. So we had 15 guests in a backyard, set it up Zoom and like Facebook Live. We do a lot of live streaming. We've gotten real good at that since, you know, the shutdown. So we were able to help with that technical side of it, as well as still providing music in a more condensed way.
How was that experience? I'm not picking your brain because I'm basically planning for the same thing next month. So tell me
Okay.
all about that.
Sure. So it was intimate and it was cool in that regard. You know, I think they're still planning on having something larger for, you know, the extended friends and family. But the people that were important to them most were there, and it was different but cool. There was really not that much dancing. I think people were still a little more reserved, but you know, as guests showed up to the backyard and saw that there was proper spacing between the chairs, people started to let their guard down with their masks. And it was even speaking with the rabbi who was doing the ceremony, right? Like he showed up with a mask on, and I told him, I go, listen, whenever I was in close contact with anybody, I had a mask on, but I was separated. I was on a deck. I had my own area, so it was comfortable for me.
Mhm.
But to make the rabbi comfortable, I told him, I go, listen, I don't know if you're planning on using your mask or not. I just want you to know these are the cleaning products I'm using to clean your microphone right in front of you, you know, just to make sure everybody was comfortable. And I think that was the primary concern of, you know, us and the couple in general, was that everybody feels comfortable. And it went off without a hitch, and it was just a really cool experience for sure.
Did people hug? That's my
Yes, and it made me so uncomfortable.
makes me really uncomfortable.
Yeah, but I mean, also, listen, I don't know who was who really. So I'm just sitting there in my own mind being like, oh, you shouldn't do that. But who knows? They could have been family members that have been quarantining together. I'm not entirely sure. But certain guests were extremely reserved and kept their masks on the entire time. So it's just a level of who feels at what level of comfortable you are.
Did they have a first dance?
They did. So they were super, and this is like not as traditional. They were very just laid back in every sense of that term, to the point where something really, really cool happened. So they chose a first dance song, and throughout the event, I was like, all right, guys, you know, now might be a, sorry, he's, I was like, now might be a good time, to kind of do your first dance while you still have your Zoom following and everything before we kind of cut ties with that. Because people can only stay involved digitally or virtually for so long. And they were like, you know what, Bryan, like, let's just push it off. We'll do it when we're ready. And I was like, awesome. I'm not going to push that. When you guys are ready, you come up to me, you let me know. So it was just kind of a nice background vibe. Dinner happened and the night started winding down and people were leaving. And I was like, they should really do their first dance, right? Like this needs to happen. It's a formality that needs to happen. So I went up and I go, guys, like I said, I didn't want to push it. I just noticed guests are leaving. Just want to shoot a reminder. Is now a good time to do your first dance? And they're like, you know what, Bryan? Like, I think we're good. And I'm like, all righty. So then the night progressed. Everybody left, and then the caterer started breaking down, and it was kind of at that time. And they came up and they were talking to me. They're like, everything was great. We love it. And I go, yeah. Still the first dance, guys. And I was like, I feel like I robbed you of that, even though it wasn't anything to do with me. And I go, can I still play the song? And they were like, absolutely. And when I played it, the two of them went down into their yard by themselves under the huppah and shared a first dance together, just the two of them. I have a picture because there was no photographer there. There was no nothing. So I literally just like snapped a photo on my phone and was like, this is so incredibly cool and intimate. And it was just like an unreal experience that I thought was the coolest thing in the world.
So what protocols are you and your company putting in place now as the states are opening up and some form of gatherings are beginning to happen again?
Sure. So, I mean, our priority number one here, as much as I want to say it's to make sure that our couples have the time of their lives, right? It's shifted to the safety of our staff and your friends and family. Not putting the entertainment side of it tertiary to anything, but it's just an added parallel that we have to deal with. So when it comes to disinfecting things, our couples are understanding that if there's multiple speeches, in between speeches, we have multiple microphones, of course, but if we ever need to hand off a microphone or anything like that, there needs to be a disinfecting process that happens. So it is about a 15-second process where we pull the windscreen out, put a new windscreen in, sanitize the microphone body itself. Things like that we're putting into place. And it's hard to do without physically doing it live at an event because you don't think of everything right off the bat. But we have a pretty good grasp on what we need to do. Obviously staying socially distant. We don't hug our couples as soon as we show up. Things like that are kind of what we're doing to make sure everybody's safe.
So what are the events that you have still on the books? What are they looking like? Are they just far and away down the year next year at this point, or have they changed them to make them more along the lines of this micro wedding affair that we're seeing the trend of?
Yeah, so it's hard to kind of see any sort of pattern because initially, right, the initial burst was everybody's like, I need to postpone my wedding. Right. So everybody that had the initial postponements, there was a busy season that we missed, that being, leading into the summer. I mean, the summer's naturally busy by itself, but even before like April, May are 2 huge months in the wedding industry. So all of those couples postponed to later in the year, like now and the fall, which now they're revisiting another postponement. But it's just so hard to make that decision because you don't know what tomorrow's guidelines are going to be. Mm-hmm. So initially it was a burst and everybody postponed, right? We're over 200 postponements, which is nuts because it's into next year and the end of this year. But what it's doing is now couples either they're hesitant to postpone again or they're holding off a bit longer. So people are holding their events. Like we don't have anything, maybe 1 or 2 next month still on the books that we don't know we're in constant contact with our couples. But I think a lot of people are holding a little stronger on their big wedding and I tell everybody the same thing. You gotta, like, it's great to be optimistic, but you also have to be realistic at the same time.
Right.
And kind of at least have these conversations with your vendors and stuff like that. So it's just so hard to follow any sort of trend, because everything, tomorrow you could have 500 people inside, or tomorrow we go on another lockdown and it's all over again. So it's really hard to anticipate anything, really.
The events that you have on the books for next month, are they scaled back, smaller events, or are they full scale events?
Sure. So a lot of the venues in our area are exploring ideas on how to hold them outdoors, right? So they still can have that big guest count. Some of them are scaling down as well. I'd say it's like 50-50, where they're like, hey, listen, we're going to have 50 of our closest friends and family because that's what we're allowed to have, and then big wedding in the future. So if the weddings are happening, I'd say it's 50-50, either scaling down or trying to hold true to that number, which is confusing to me, because on the groom side, it's like, how do you invite the people, but then also might be like, hey, you're also not allowed to come now. So just a weird on both sides of it, for sure.
The people at the affair, when you were at your first and like the last event that you just had, were they nervous? Did you feel like, even outside in a backyard, was there, a caution in the air? Were they, afraid, or were they ready to be out and celebrating?
So more the latter, for sure. I think people have just been cooped up for so long that they're like, even a lot of couples are nervous. They're like, well, we have a Thursday wedding and it's not going to be the same as our Saturday wedding. And I completely disagree now, because people are
party whenever, wherever, we'll be there.
Exactly, right? Like, people are looking for an excuse to have a great time. And I think that seeing the last two weddings, like, I didn't have anything. I had one at the very start and one at the very end. So they were both kind of, the last one I did this past weekend, right? I think people were just excited to be out. So there was less caution, but still caution nonetheless. The last full scale wedding I did, you wouldn't even think pandemic was even anything. It was just normal, packed in, like 200 people on a small dance floor, like sweating and close, and which now it's like super foreign, being like, oh my goodness, you touched somebody. Like,
what do you think this entire experience has taught you, both as someone working in the industry, but also as someone, who will get married eventually themselves? It's
definitely made me be much more relatable to the situation with everybody. So what's cool about 99% of my couples that I've had conversations with, either postponing or still having their final planning meeting and stuff like that, is everybody's very understanding that there's nothing that you can do right now. So it's kind of just, it's just, you got to figure it out and roll with the punches. And I'm in the same mindset, but it's nice that I can see both sides of that and relate directly to that emotion with people. But it's not hard to do, because everybody's understanding of the fact that this is a crisis. Our industry in particular is getting hit real hard. Think of how people, with the restaurant industries, they were like, let's support local restaurants because they're getting hit hard. And not saying like, crying the blues over here, but like, people forgot about the entertainment industry that's still, not back into it, and probably won't be for a little bit of time. Everybody's focused, on the gyms, and like, yeah, we're in that section as well. But people are just really understanding, and it makes the process easier on our end.
Have you translated the work in different forms of creativity, while you haven't been able to, be at the entertainment for weddings at this point and DJing weddings? Have you been able to, what have you done in other ways?
Sure. So, we're here to entertain, whether it's on a dance floor with 250 people or in our living rooms. So live streaming became, this huge hit. Let's put on a live stream and theme it. Let's do an 80s night or a 90s night. And we're never we pride ourselves on not being those corny game show host DJs. But for these live streams, like 80s night, I had a NASA t-shirt, a sweatband, a jean jacket. I went to Target and spent like $200 on an outfit to be that and be that entertainment and just put forward. We had people, hundreds of people viewing us and dancing in their living rooms and then texting us on the side being like, hey, this really brightened our day. It was awesome to see that you guys are still doing this.
I appreciate that determination, and that's making me excited for wedding season whenever it begins again, and God willing, my own and yours down the line. I'm getting pumped. I'm ready for a Wednesday wedding at 5 o'clock. Whoever wants to invite me, I will be there, and I will be thrilled.
I hope I'm DJing it. So
exactly. Monday wedding. See you then. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, Bryan. I really appreciate it. You gave the fiance a little bit of a break, so he got some quiet time. He thanks you too. And
there we go. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. It's awesome that I could fill both roles for you. And I hope that, the whole goal of this is to either inform and entertain. So we're both doing our jobs, and exactly. So, I mean, we're going to get there. I'm optimistic about it. We're going to get there. And if I pat our industry on the back because we're taking it on the chin, and we're going to come back stronger, and, we're there. We're still there. That's
absolutely. So. Well, thanks again for talking, Bryan. This has been Let's Talk About It, and we'll talk to you next time.